He thought his wife was just cheating, but it was all part of something much bigger. Bass discovered that Antonella had been lying to him for years. Her connections to criminal organizations, secret financial transactions, everything turned out to be part of a scheme he never realized he was trapped in. But the worst part? Their son, Prescott, was in danger too. When a mysterious man appears in the doorway and says, "This was part of the plan," Bass realizes, there's no turning back now. Bass had long felt that his marriage to Antonella had been falling apart. He had always strived to be the perfect husband and father to Prescott, but lately, he increasingly felt that his efforts were crashing against a wall of misunderstanding. It all started with her behavior, detachment, constant lateness from work, a resentment he couldn't understand. And although he tried to be patient, deep down, he felt betrayed. One day, when he returned home, Antonella was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Her gaze was focused, as if she was expecting something. "What are you doing?" Bass asked, taking off his jacket and sitting beside her. "Just thinking," she replied without looking up. "Thinking? About what?" His voice sounded sharp, even to himself. He felt that something was wrong, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what. "About us," she finally looked him in the eyes. "And about Prescott." Bass was surprised. What happened to him? He tensed up because Prescott was their son, and his well-being was always the top priority. "Nothing, he's fine. But I think we need to talk about our relationship. Something has changed between us, and I don't know how to fix it." Bass felt his heart clench. He had been prepared for this moment, but he never thought it would come so suddenly. "Do you want a divorce?" His voice sounded cold, even to himself. "No," she said, "but I can't live like this anymore. We're like two strangers under one roof." These words hit like a hammer. Bass couldn't say anything. All his attempts to preserve their relationship, all his efforts, had yielded no results. His life was beginning to fall apart, and he didn't have enough time to understand why. But just as he was about to stand up and leave the room, Antonella added, "There's something else I need to tell you, Bass. It's important." She looked at him with a serious expression, as if searching for the right words. "What is it?" he asked, his heart bracing for another blow. I met someone." Those words were the final straw for him. He felt his consciousness fill with emptiness, unable to comprehend what had happened to his life. "Who is he?" His voice sounded foreign, just like the entire situation. "It doesn't matter. I wanted you to know." He didn't know how to react. His brain couldn't process all this information fast enough, and all he could do was try to maintain some dignity. "Is that all you wanted to say?" He leaned back in his chair, feeling his strength leave his body. "I just wanted you to know," she answered. Bass remained silent, his soul empty. How could everything be undone if all of this had been a lie? But what happened next surpassed all his expectations. A few days later, he accidentally found a message on Antonella's phone that made his heart freeze. "I know you want to take Prescott, but you won't get him. I will do everything to prevent it." It was from someone Bass didn't know. And although he had no idea who it was, one thing was clear. Someone wanted to take his son, and this was only the beginning of a battle for his family. That evening, he reached out to an old friend, James, a private detective. He told him about what he had found and asked for help figuring out who could be behind this threat. "Bass, I know what it's like to lose everything you love," James said as they sat in his office. "But you have to be careful. This could be more complicated than you think." "I know," Bass replied, his face set, "but I am ready to go all the way to protect my son." Soon, he began gathering evidence to find out who was behind the mysterious message. What he discovered shocked him even more. It seemed that Antonella herself was involved, but with an unlikely ally he never expected to see. Now, Bass had a choice: fight for his son and his dignity, or leave everything behind and start a new life. But every step he took brought him closer to a new revelation that would change everything. Bass sat in his office, staring at the wall. For several days, he couldn't shake off what had happened. All these years, he had either not noticed or refused to notice how Antonella was gradually drifting away from him. Lately, his suspicions had only grown stronger, but he had always dismissed them, thinking they were just his fears. Now, everything became clear. He recalled how often he had seen her gaze when she talked to younger men, her laughter, the excessive attention she paid to her appearance. Bass had tried to ignore these moments, but his intuition had never failed him. And now, when he finally saw the message, he realized that all his suspicions were not unfounded. That day, when he found the message on Antonella's phone, he couldn't take it anymore. He decided to talk to her. He needed to know the truth, even if it was the last thing he wanted to hear. Antonella. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable tension in it. We need to talk. Antonella was sitting on the couch, her face unreadable. About what? She looked at him as if she felt nothing. About your secrets, Bass said, stepping closer. I found your messages. I know you've been hiding something from me for a long time. Her face changed, and she quickly hid her phone in her pocket, but Bass noticed her movements. Her reaction told him more than words. What did you find? Her voice trembled slightly, but she tried to remain calm. I found a message from someone. And you know exactly who I'm talking about. Bass paused for a moment, looking into her eyes. You were flirting with him, and this isn't the first time. I've seen you with other young men, and I know you're hiding something more. Antonella lifted her head but said nothing. She tried to look indifferent, but Bass noticed her fingers nervously playing with her wedding ring. It's not what you think, she finally said, but her voice was too weak. You're telling me it's not what I think. While I see how you talk to other men, how indifferent you are to me. His voice became harsher. I know you well, Antonella. You haven't been the same for a long time, and I can't ignore it anymore. I didn't cheat on you, she exclaimed, but her words didn't sound convincing. I didn't know how to tell you about my feelings. I got confused. Confused? Bass almost laughed. And what do you say about all these flirtations with other men? Is that part of your confusion too? Antonella lowered her head, unable to find words to justify herself. You were always so serious, so closed off, she said, lifting her head. I was looking for attention that you didn't give me. I just couldn't live like that anymore. Bass felt his heart clench. He had always thought their marriage was strong, that he and Antonella could get through any difficulties together. But now he realized that there was so much he hadn't seen, or hadn't wanted to see. You did this not for us, but for yourself, Bass said, his voice dull. And you didn't even think that we could have solved this together. I didn't know what to do, Bass. I thought I would just stay in place, that it wouldn't matter. She rested her head on his shoulder, but he pulled away. You made it matter, he said, stepping back. And now I know that what's important to us doesn't matter to you. Don't say that, Bass, please. Her voice was desperate. I know everything, he replied, looking into her eyes. I know everything, Antonella, and I won't tolerate it anymore. If you want me to stay, you'll have to change everything. Otherwise, I will take Prescott and leave. These words immediately filled her mind. She knew that Bass could do it, and her fear grew. You can't take him, she exclaimed. I have every right to, Bass said calmly, but with immense determination in his voice. You not only betrayed me, but you put our son's future at risk. Antonella burst into tears, her tears dripping onto the pillow. She knew that her choice had cost her not only her marriage, but also her future with Prescott. Please, Bass, don't do this, she grabbed his hand. I love you. But Bass was no longer the man she once knew. He had made his choice. He would take Prescott, and this time he wouldn't let her ruin his life again. Bass stood at the door, looking at Antonella intently. She was still holding his hand, her eyes full of tears, but now he felt something more, something beyond just betrayal, a deeper disappointment and pain from seeing everything they had built together falling apart. You really want this, don't you? He asked quietly, but his voice revealed his inner pain. You want me to take Prescott? Do you even understand what that would mean? Antonella let go of his hand and lowered her gaze. She seemed to have lost all her strength. There was despair in her voice. I don't know what to do, Bass. I'm confused, truly. I don't want to lose you, but I also can't let go of all this. You have no idea how much I'm suffering. She remained silent, but Bass noticed the change in her gaze. It was not just fear. It was shock, as if she had just realized that everything she had done had been meaningless. You forget why I became this way, Bass said, stepping away from her, trying to leave this place behind. You forget that we were a team, and you chose to destroy everything. Antonella lifted her head, her face torn between remorse and pride. She took a few steps toward him. I didn't want this, Base, but you know how things changed between us. There was a wall between us, and I didn't know how to break it. It all started when you became more and more focused on work, and I had nothing left but to seek emotions you weren't giving me. Base held his breath, recalling how often he had worked late and distanced himself from his family. He had never thought that Antonella could feel such a gap between them, and yet, he could not forgive her for going to another man. And how did that help our family? His voice grew harsher. You gave a part of yourself to someone else, while I was left here alone with our problems. Antonella closed her eyes, her voice trembling. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was my mistake. I lost myself, Base, and I don't know how to find my way back. They stood in silence. Base could hear his own heartbeat speeding up. This was not just betrayal. This was a fight for what was left of their marriage, and he didn't know if he could save it. Prescott, he suddenly said, changing the subject, I can't let you take him with you. He needs stability, not this chaos. You made your choice, Antonella. Her eyes filled with tears, and she rushed to him, grabbing his hand. Base, please, don't take him. He's not at fault. I know I made a mistake, but I love him, and I don't want to lose him. He looked at her, but his gaze had turned cold and distant. You don't understand that he has the right to a normal life, Base replied. I don't want Prescott to grow up in this kind of atmosphere. He deserves better. Just then, the front door suddenly opened, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Alex, an old friend of Base's, someone he hadn't spoken to in a long time. Base looked at him in surprise. What are you doing here, Alex? He asked, trying to hide his shock. Alex looked at Base, holding a small bag in his hand, and paused for a few seconds as if hesitating. Then he stepped forward. I came to talk, Base, he said, looking at Antonella. There's something you need to know, and it might change everything. Base caught his gaze and suddenly felt his heart race. He couldn't believe Alex had shown up at this exact moment when everything already felt so tangled. Antonella noticed the change in his expression and froze. What do you mean, Alex? Base asked, his voice slightly tense. Alex glanced at Antonella, then back at Base, and slowly said, This concerns your wife. You don't know everything that's been happening, and what you think happened might actually be something entirely different. Base felt his heart skip a few beats. What do you mean? His voice lowered, though he tried to stay calm. Alex hesitated, then pulled a few letters from his bag and handed them to Base. This is what I found. It might be important to you. He looked at Base and added, These letters might tell you more than you think. Base took the letters, and his gaze immediately fell on one of them. The text was clear and sharp. Antonella has other plans for Prescott. You'll be surprised when you find out who's behind this. Base stood there, holding the letters Alex had just given him. His fingers trembled involuntarily, and he felt as if he had just opened the door to a dark truth he didn't want to see. Antonella stood nearby, her expression a mix of anxiety and fear. She clearly hadn't expected all of this to come to light. What are these letters? She asked, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. Base, please, I don't want to have this conversation anymore. Base lifted his head and looked at her with disdain. He couldn't play these games any longer. These letters were proof of everything he had suspected. They were exactly what he had been avoiding for so long. What is the real purpose of your plan, Antonella? He asked, his voice cold and stern. Do you want me to take Prescott? Or are you planning to do it yourself? This isn't just a divorce. This looks like a conspiracy. Antonella nodded, but there was no longer the same calm in her eyes. She pretended to have everything under control, but her inner fear was evident on her face. I didn't know it was this serious, she said, but Base didn't believe her words. You didn't know? He repeated, struggling to contain his anger. I thought we had a marriage, but you've secretly been planning something for years. You used me as a cover, and now you're trying to do what you had already decided long ago. Antonella sobbed, unable to find the words, and lowered her head. Base felt a storm of emotions brewing inside him. He couldn't understand why everything had turned out this way, and why it seemed like she had long stopped being his partner and had only been watching from a distance. Alex, seeing how the situation was unfolding, left the room, leaving Base and Antonella alone. Base felt isolated and empty. It was hard for him to comprehend why their marriage had fallen apart like this. But now it was clear. Antonella had had her own plans for a long time, and those plans clearly didn't include him. "Do you want to take Prescott?" she asked, raising her eyes again. "Do you want to take him away from his mother?" Base looked at her as if she were a stranger. What had happened to the woman he once loved? What had happened to their family's happiness? "Prescott has the right to a normal life," Base said, gathering his thoughts. "I can't let you manipulate him. He shouldn't be a part of your games." They fell silent, and the silence between them became almost unbearable. Base looked around the room, which still held so many memories. Here, in this house, they had built their life together, and now it had all been destroyed by betrayal. It seemed to him that one more conversation might change everything. "What did you find in those letters?" she finally asked. Her voice sounded calmer, but Base could sense a trace of panic hidden in her words. He placed the letters on the table and opened one of them. Inside was another photograph, Antonella, smiling, standing next to a man he didn't recognize. Base felt his heart clench. It was her former partner, the one she had likely been involved with before they got married. "Is this all you wanted to tell me?" Base asked, his voice nearly breaking under the weight of the stress. "You went back to him, and now you want me to give up Prescott, to leave this house?" Antonella remained silent, unsure of what to say. She tried to justify herself, but there was no longer the same confidence in her words as before. She lowered her head again and said, "I don't know how it happened. It was difficult for me, Base. I was weak. I didn't know how to get you back." Base didn't know what to say. It felt like he had fallen into a trap. He had loved her, but it wasn't the same anymore. Their marriage had been built on lies, and now he couldn't ignore it all. "I know I betrayed you," Antonella continued, "but I really love you, Base, and I don't want to lose Prescott. I'm willing to change everything." He didn't respond, simply looking at her. Words couldn't change what he was seeing in front of him. She had destroyed their family, and he couldn't allow this to go without consequences. "I will do everything to take Prescott," Base said, his voice firm, more than ever before. "You are losing everything that could have mattered. I can't love you anymore." Antonella shook her head, her face twisted with pain. She couldn't believe that it had all ended like this. "Base, please, don't do this," she said barely audibly, but he was already walking away. As he left the house, Base felt his heart grow heavy with everything that had happened. His mind was filled with questions. What had he really found in those letters? What had happened to his wife? But all of it only mattered for one thing. He had to take Prescott and start a new life. Base sat in his car, staring at the house that had once been his home, feeling the cold seep into his soul. All these years, he had lived in lies, not realizing that his wife had been keeping secrets from him. Now that he knew the truth, it was hard for him to imagine how things could ever return to normal. He took a deep breath and, gathering his thoughts, stepped out of the car. In his hands was a folder filled with documents he had collected over the past few days. They were supposed to be his last hope, proof that Antonella had been dishonest not only with him but also with herself. He couldn't allow her manipulations to continue, especially when it came to Prescott. He approached the door and hesitated. His hand hovered over the doorbell for a long time before he pressed it. Antonella opened the door and looked at him. Her face was emotionless, but in her eyes shone the same question she had probably been asking herself ever since this all began. "What now?" "Base, what happened? Did you come to take him?" she asked, her voice not angry, but filled with confusion. "I came to end this," he replied, holding the folder of evidence in his hand. "I know everything. You won't be able to escape from this." Antonella nervously wrung her hands, realizing that he already knew more than she could have imagined. "I don't understand what you're talking about," she said, but her words sounded too artificial. Base opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. In each of them, she was with someone else. He remained silent as she looked at them, and with each passing second, her face grew paler. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice growing thinner. "I want the truth," Base said, placing the photographs on the table. "You've been betraying me for a long time, Antonella." And now I have to take Prescott. He can't stay with someone who lies and manipulates him. Antonella collapsed into a chair, seemingly unsure of how to react. Her heart was racing, and she felt as if the ground was slipping from beneath her feet. "You don't understand," she said after a pause. "I didn't do this because you no longer mattered to me. My soul had been craving something else for a long time, and I couldn't bear the emptiness anymore." "Don't justify yourself," Bass interrupted her. "I hear your words, but they no longer matter. I know that you decided to leave me a long time ago." Antonella lifted her gaze, and in her eyes, he saw the reflection of defeat. "Bass, I'm so sorry. I don't know how this happened. I never wanted it to go this far." He couldn't allow her to manipulate him again and fall into the trap of her remorse. "You already made your choice," he said, unfolding another document that lay on the table. "This is no longer just your mistake. These are the plans you've been living by. I can't be part of your game anymore." Antonella sighed and lowered her head. "I know this was a huge mistake, but I love Prescott. You don't understand how much this hurts me." "You don't love him," Bass said coldly. "You just want control. You want to manipulate. You lost your right to him a long time ago." She remained silent, and Bass felt the weight of the situation growing. This wasn't an easy decision, but he knew what had to be done. Prescott shouldn't grow up in an atmosphere of lies and manipulation. He deserved better than this. "You won't take him," she said with one last glimmer of hope in her voice. "He's my son." Bass looked at her with deep disappointment. "Yes, he's your son, but you're no longer the person I can trust. I will take him so that he has a chance at a better life." He turned and walked away, leaving Antonella alone with her defeat. As he made his way to the car, Bass felt the months of tension and worry finally dissipating. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he was sure he had made the right move. Prescott, even without knowing it, now had a chance for a new life. But there was still one question lingering in Bass's mind, refusing to leave him alone. Who was the man in the photographs? Was he just a past connection, or was there something more? That thought wouldn't leave him, and he was certain that this wasn't the end of the story. Bass sat in his car, staring at the house he was leaving behind. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Why had Antonella chosen this path? She had been his wife, his friend, his support through all of life's challenges. And now, all of it was destroyed. He couldn't leave Prescott with her. He couldn't let him grow up in an environment of deceit and manipulation. And even though he believed he had made the right choice, doubts still crept in. Had he really done the right thing? Would Prescott be able to understand why he had taken him away? What if he was too young to grasp it? Bass closed his eyes, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. For over a year, he had watched Antonella change. She was no longer the same person, and he had a strong feeling that her behavior wasn't random. It was part of something bigger, and he needed to find out why. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of someone he had been searching for a long time. Liam, an old friend who worked in private investigation. "Liam, it's Bass," he said quietly, trying to keep the tension out of his voice. "I need you to find out everything you can about someone from my past. She's tangled me in her lies again, and I want to know who's really behind this." "I'm listening. Who is it?" Liam's voice was serious and determined. "Antonella." Bass paused. "I think she has connections that might explain why she's been doing all of this." Liam responded briefly. "That won't be a problem. I'll dig into her past. But I also want to know why you're reaching out to me now. Do you have any new suspicions?" Bass swallowed hard. "I've seen her with someone, multiple times, Liam. I don't know who it is. But this isn't just an affair. I believe there's something bigger behind it." "All right, I'll take care of it. You'll find out the truth." After hanging up, Bass looked at the house once again. He was already prepared for the worst, but at the same time, he felt that this wasn't over. Something was off, and this part of the truth could lead him straight to the heart of what had happened. A few days later, Bass received a new message from Liam. He quickly opened it. "I found her old contacts," Liam wrote. "These people from her past, they have direct connections to big money, and I think this could be part of her plan. I recommend being careful." Bass clenched his teeth. This was turning into something serious. He couldn't just let it go anymore. The next day, after work, Bass drove to one of Liam's contacts. It was an old warehouse, disguised as an ordinary office. He knocked on the door, and Liam opened it. "It's you?" Liam asked, noticing how Bass nervously adjusted his jacket. "I can't wait," Bass replied. "What did you find?" Liam handed him several photographs and letters. Everything was about the people Antonella had connections with. In one of the photos, there was a woman Bass had never seen before. But Liam explained that this woman had long been associated with one of the criminal organizations in their city. "Are you sure this is related to her?" Bass asked, staring at the photo. "It's not just a connection, Bass," Liam said. "I'm sure Antonella knew about all of this, and she might be involved in something much bigger than just an affair." Bass tried to process what he had just been told. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was part of a larger scheme, and Antonella had a role in it. All of her connections and all of her secrets were now tied to money and influence that she could use. "I'm taking Prescott," Bass said firmly. "Now I understand that this is the only right choice." Liam simply nodded. "But you have to be careful. Antonella won't give up so easily. She's going to fight, and this won't be easy." Bass left the office and headed toward the house, knowing that now he had to make an even harder choice. He returned to the place where it all began and to his son, Prescott. It wasn't too late yet, and he hoped he could protect the one he loved most. Bass sat in his car, watching as the streetlights cast a soft glow against the glass. The night was deep, but he couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thousands of thoughts. What to do next? How to convince Prescott to stay with him? How to prove that what Antonella was hiding could harm not only him, but also their son? On one hand, he knew Antonella was deceiving him, but on the other, his heart beat for Prescott. After all, this was his son, and he couldn't allow his life to be ruined by someone else's irresponsibility and lies. The wind rustled softly outside the window when Bass heard his phone ring. He reacted instantly, and Liam's name appeared on the screen. "Liam, what's new?" Bass asked anxiously, answering the call. "There's new information, Bass. But I can't explain it over the phone," Liam said, his voice serious and tense. "I need you to come over. We have a problem. A big problem." Bass immediately started his car and drove toward Liam's familiar office. He was eager to know what Liam had found and why he sounded so worried. When he arrived, he stepped into the office and saw Liam, as always, sitting at his desk, surrounded by piles of documents. "What happened?" Bass asked impatiently, already prepared to learn more about Antonella. "You remember that woman I told you about when I showed you the photos?" Liam pushed some papers aside, revealing another photo on the table. It was a young woman with a serious expression, someone Bass had never seen before. "Yeah, I saw her," Bass replied. "That's her, but why are you so focused on her?" Liam leaned forward, his voice lowering as if he was afraid someone might hear them. "This isn't just any woman. This is Nadia, your ex," Liam said, looking straight into Bass's eyes. Bass leaned back, shocked as if he had just been hit by an explosion. His heart clenched sharply. He couldn't comprehend what he had just heard. "How is this possible?" "You must be mistaken, Liam. This is impossible. Nadia left me years ago." Bass paused for a moment. "I checked," Liam said quietly. "She was involved in all of this, and I'm sure she has a direct connection to everything happening right now. I dug up more information, and it looks like Antonella and Nadia had something in common. This was part of their plan." Bass closed his eyes, trying to process what he had just been told. Nadia? She was a woman from his past, someone he had once been in a relationship with, but they had ended things a long time ago. How could she be connected to Antonella? What ties could they possibly have? And why, after all these years, was he facing her again? How is this possible, Liam? Why are she and Antonella working together? What does this mean for Prescott? Bass asked, trying to calm his nerves. Liam flipped through the documents again and showed Bass another piece of information. Nadia's connections to underground groups she had worked with, secret transactions, and hidden dealings. It all pointed to one thing. Everything happening with Antonella was part of a much bigger plan. This has to do with money, power, and the circles they operate in. And Prescott, he might be in danger too, Liam said, trying to piece together the events. Bass felt his heart start to beat faster. What if this was all part of a bigger plan, and Prescott was just a piece of it? "I have to stop this," Bass said, standing up, losing any hope of peace. Liam looked at him with understanding. You can't act recklessly, Base. They won't give up without a fight. Base walked out of the office, his thoughts overwhelming him as he got into his car. He drove back home. This time, everything had to change. When he walked into the house, he saw Prescott sitting on the couch, watching TV. Base approached him, watching his son, feeling that he was about to make the hardest decision of his life. Prescott, he said softly, we need to talk. Prescott lifted his head and looked at his father. About what? I'm taking you away from here, Base said, looking into his son's eyes. Your mother. She's not who she seems to be. You have to come with me. Prescott looked surprised and confused. Why, Dad? What happened? Mom. He couldn't finish his sentence. Base sighed heavily, realizing that these words could change everything. I'll explain it to you later, he said, making his final decision. But right now, you have to leave all of this behind. And even though Base was ready to fight for the truth, even if it meant losing everything, his heart pounded for his son, the one he was trying to protect from this terrible world. Base stood at Prescott's doorway, his heart racing faster than usual. His son seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation, but there was still doubt in his eyes. He couldn't comprehend why his father had suddenly decided they had to leave everything behind. His mom, their home, the life they knew. You have to explain to me why everything is suddenly changing, Prescott said, his voice full of worry. Base sat beside him on the couch, exhaling heavily before looking at his son. I know you want to stay with your mom, Base began, but what I've learned about her makes me believe that it's not safe. You have to be somewhere safe. But she's my mom. How can you say that? Prescott was both confused and hurt. Prescott, I don't want you to be in danger because of what she's involved in. Base placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. This is hard, I know, but sometimes parents have to make tough decisions. Prescott pulled away from his father's touch and stood up, his face tight with emotion. I don't want you to take me away. I don't understand why this is happening, why you don't want me to stay home with Mom. What happened? Base swallowed hard, struggling to look at his son. This was harder than he had imagined. You're still too young, and I don't want you to get caught up in what I've discovered. Antonella has her secrets, and they could affect your life. Prescott shrugged, unsure of what to think. He could feel that his father was trying to protect him, but everything seemed too complicated and mysterious. He felt like he had the right to know the truth. I want to know what's going on, Prescott finally said. If you want me to leave, you have to explain it to me. Base stood up and began pacing the room, trying to find the right words. He understood that this was a huge loss for his son and that he needed to build a bridge of trust between them. But was he ready to reveal the whole truth? Because that could destroy everything. I found out that your mother and another woman, Nadia, have a business together, Base finally said. It's connected to some very dangerous people. I can't say more, but I don't want you caught up in all of this. Prescott listened, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't ready for this. That's not true. You just don't love Mom, he shouted, clenching his fists. I love you, Prescott, and that's exactly why I'm doing this. My goal is to keep you safe. Base stepped closer, his voice softer. I want you to understand, I don't want to lose you. Prescott hesitated, confusion filling his eyes. He couldn't believe that his mother, who had always been an authority figure for him, could be involved in something bad. But something in his father's words made him doubt. Suddenly, Antonella appeared in the doorway. Her face was serious, and she quickly approached her son. Prescott, I don't want you to believe these rumors, she said, her gaze distant. I want you to stay with me. Base doesn't know what he's talking about. Base shot her a cold look. You have no right to deceive him. I know everything, Antonella. I know about your ties to this woman. Antonella hesitated for a moment, but then lifted her head. You don't understand, Base. It's not that simple. I'm doing all of this for our son. You don't know the full story. Do you want to explain why you went down your own path and got involved with those people? Base pressed on. Antonella sighed, and for a brief moment, her expression changed. It was as if she was trying to find the right words. I had no choice, she said, her voice quiet. It's not what you think. I was trying to protect Prescott from others. This is all part of a plan. Prescott, Hearing these words, couldn't decide whether to believe her. He looked at both his parents, realizing that things weren't as simple as he had thought. I don't want to live in lies anymore, Prescott finally said, his voice uncertain. I want to know the truth. Base and Antonella exchanged glances, and in their eyes, a battle was visible. But this was the moment of truth. They had to choose. Would their son trust them or not? Antonella finally spoke. Fine. You will learn the truth. But it will change everything. Prescott stood there watching them, while Base felt that the future of their family now depended on what happened next. Antonella silently sat down on the couch, exhaling deeply. She looked at Prescott, then at Base, as if hesitating on what to say next. Base didn't take his eyes off his wife, his face growing even colder. He knew he was losing control of the situation, but the more she remained silent, the more he felt everything was falling apart. All right, Antonella finally said, her voice trembling. There's a lot you don't understand, Base. Prescott stood in the corner of the room, trying to grasp what was happening. His mother's words echoed in his mind, but he still couldn't believe what she was saying. He was confused and felt that both of them were hiding something. You have to explain to me why you got involved with those people. Base clenched his fists, his voice calm but filled with anger. Antonella stood up and stepped closer, her expression serious. I did it for you. For us. Prescott and I could have had everything, but when I found out what was really happening, when I saw who you really were, I decided to act. You can't be like this. Like what? Base frowned. You don't know what it's like to fight, Base. You don't know what it's like to live in a world where every step you take matters, where there are people who always want to break you. I was trying to protect us. Prescott felt his heartbeat quicken. He didn't understand why all of this was happening, but he was completely losing his grasp on what was real. How was it possible that his mom and dad, the two people he loved and saw as his role models, now seemed like strangers? They tried to destroy everything. Prescott, Antonella continued, her voice now almost emotionless. They didn't just come after us. They tried to take you away. Prescott coughed, trying to make sense of his mother's words, but something in her expression made his heart tighten. What do you mean? He asked, trying to hold himself together. Antonella looked at her son, her eyes filling with tears. She took his hand and pulled him close. I had to keep you in the shadows, Prescott. It was all for your safety. They could have taken you. They knew everything about our finances, about everything I was doing. It was a game, and I couldn't allow you to become part of it. Base was confused, unsure of what to think. He felt completely shut out by his own wife. This was no longer the Antonella he had once dreamed of a future with. Everything had changed. You deceived me, Base said, his voice turning firm. You never told me about this. You kept it all a secret. Antonella sighed, averting her gaze. And what? Would you have understood? You were always so naive. You never saw the real world. I did this because we had no other choice. Prescott stood there, bewildered, unsure why his mother couldn't just tell the truth. Why had she hidden these things for so long? You haven't even explained why you sided with them, why you stayed with those people. Base raised his voice, but Antonella only looked at him and said, Because I had to. I had no choice. And you should have understood that. What the hell is going on? Base snapped, his face twisted with despair. You did all of this for us? You left me in the dark? I was always there for you, Base. Antonella shouted back, her voice growing louder. You don't understand because you're not ready to see the truth. Everything I did for us. Prescott now felt completely lost in darkness. What was he supposed to believe? Who was telling the truth? And did he really want to know all these secrets if they could tear his family apart? Then, the unexpected happened. A new man appeared in the doorway, a stranger to both Prescott and Base. He had dark features and was tall, his expression filled with confidence. What the? Base couldn't finish his sentence as he saw him. Antonella immediately looked away. The man stepped into the room and stopped in front of them. Sorry for being late, but I see this is an important moment, he said with a cold smile. Who are you? Base asked, his voice shaking with anger. My name is James, the man replied, glancing at Prescott. And this was part of the plan, Base. Everything you thought you knew is only a small piece of the bigger picture. Prescott took a step back, feeling the ground shake beneath him. Who was this man, and what was happening to his family? Should Base take Prescott away from Antonella, or had this already gone too far?